Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We kick things off with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out a virtual assembly line of wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. As bad as things got this week around the nation, let's start with one courageous action that likely prevented things from getting a whole lot worse. It didn't get as much play as it should have from the Trump-deranged media presenting the riots as another in a long line of Trump scandals, and that's because Terrence Floyd, the brother of the man killed by those Minneapolis cops, invoked the Almighty as he begged protesters for an end to the violence.
What are y'all doing? Y'all doing nothing, because that's not going to bring my brother back at all. My family is a peaceful family. My family is God-fearing. Let's do this another way. Let's stop thinking that our voice don't matter. That's right. And vote. Do this peacefully. Please.
Terrence Floyd and his family, friends, associates kneeled in a prayer circle for peace and calm, and the violence melted away. But the elite media preferred to focus on perverting the actions of President Trump, per usual, after Trump said he would use whatever force is necessary to, as he said, dominate the streets. Anderson Cooper on CNN called it basically an excuse for fascism.
We are witnessing a failure of presidential leadership at a time when this country, when we, the people, need it more than ever, perhaps, in our lifetime. The president seems to think that dominating black people, dominating peaceful protesters is law and order. It's not. He calls them thugs. Who is the thug here?
Okay, for just a moment. Imagine if someone on Fox News called Barack Obama a thug, or for that matter, a fascist, racist, white supremacist. Of course, not that. Like they've been calling Trump for years. But here's a question for you. What happened to all the centuries-long white supremacy you decry, as if roving gangs of white people are prowling around looking for black people to beat up or kill? What happened to that white supremacy when Barack Obama was president for 8 years? But suddenly, when Trump is elected, the country is completely given over to white supremacy. Of course, Anderson Cooper and his fellow inside Washington so-called journalists can make sweeping, virtue-signaling statements from the sheltered comfort of their studios. But what people like him say mean absolutely nothing, just empty calories revealing their own ignorance. What does mean something are the viewpoints of people who've actually been on the ground and paid a price seeking racial justice, like Andrew Young, who was mentored by Martin Luther King Jr. as he watched protests in Atlanta this week.
The quieter and calmer the demonstration is, the more powerful and effective it is. We were with the Klan that was acting worse than this and beating us up in St. Augustine. But when they came down and marched through the community, we sang to them and welcomed them. And the power of people being able to forgive publicly was one of the things that swung the Congress to vote for civil rights legislation. Everything that they are enjoying down there, we fought for.
There you go. These people, the peaceful protesters and the savages exploiting the nation's pain, are beneficiaries of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. But the side effect is that Democrats have controlled urban America for decades, and their single-mindedness about race has been devastating, according to longtime conservative community activist Bob Woodson.
After 50 years of liberal Democrats running the inner cities where we have all of these inequities that we have, race is being used as a ruse, as a means of deflecting attention away from critical questions such as why are poor blacks failing in systems run by their own people? And if we continue to look at life through a racial prism, when evil wears a black face, it will escape detection and therefore correction.
But the corrections necessary to tame the beast of racial bias is for white people to just get with the program and admit the country is in the grips of systemic racism. Why, just listen to the woman known as Hanoi Jane, actress Jane Fonda.
Because we're white, we have had privilege. Even the poorest of us have had privilege, and we need to recognize that, and we have to understand what it is that keeps racism in place. The policies, redlining, banking policies, mortgage policies, all of the things that are really making it very, very difficult for black people to lift themselves up. The policies have to be changed, and then white people have to understand the history that has led to this, and we have to get to know black people, and they have to become our friends.
You mean like, I'm not a racist. One of my best friends is black. But Nicole Hannah Jones, the radical woman who started the famous or infamous 1619 Project at the New York Times, claiming the real founding of the country was not with the Declaration of Independence in 1776, but the arrival of slave ships in 1619, says open racists are infiltrating the police.
The FBI put out a report just a couple of years ago raising the alarm about the infiltration of police forces across this nation by white supremacist groups, including the Ku Klux Klan. And in fact, the role that police departments have played has been to enforce racial laws and racial policies against black Americans.
Racial laws, racial policies? No word as to what those specific laws or policies are or where they're written, but the point is that it makes for the useful narrative of America as a baldly white supremacist country. Now, we'll close with something at once amusing and remarkably ignorant, which means it's something said by presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, this time in response to how the police can be reformed.
The idea that instead of standing there and teaching a cop when there's an unarmed person coming at him with a knife or something to shoot him in the leg instead of in the heart is a very different thing.
Aim for the leg, not the heart. Hey, as someone said, why not try to shoot the gun out of the perpetrator's hand, just like they do on TV? Right.